The day my billionaire grandfather's will was read, my entire family walked out millionaires. Me? I got $50. Not 50,000. Not even a sentimental trinket. Just two crisp bills, slid across the mahogany table like an insult, and the cold satisfaction in my father's eyes. My brother didn't even bother to hide his smirk. He openly laughed. Someone behind me muttered, "Figures." But me? I didn't say a word. My world shrank to those two bills in my hand, the air thick with their unspoken judgment. I just stared at them, fighting the rising heat in my cheeks. But amidst the humiliation, a strange thought flickered. My grandfather, William Carter, was never careless. Not with his empire, not with people. This wasn't an oversight. This felt deliberate. And then, as the harsh office lights glinted off the paper, I saw it. A tiny mark, almost imperceptible. A whisper of a line that most would miss. But I remembered his words. If you want to hide the truth, put it where no one bothers to look. Just 1 hour later, with those two $50 bills clutched in my hand, I walked into a quiet bank office. I slid them across the desk to the manager and watched as his eyes widened. Then he froze. Now, to truly understand that moment, you need to know a little about me. My name is Hazel, and in my family, I was always the quiet one. Not irresponsible, not a failure, just quiet. While my brother, Ethan, mastered the art of taking up space, talking loudest, and turning every interaction into an opportunity, I perfected the art of observation. My parents glowed when they spoke of Ethan's ambition, his confidence, his glittering future. For me, their words were softer. Hazel is sweet. Hazel is easy. Hazel doesn't ask for much. What they really meant, of course, was Hazel won't cause trouble. It was my grandfather, William Carter, who seemed to be the only one who truly saw the difference. To the rest of the world, he was a titan, a self-made billionaire who commanded respect. People literally straightened their spines when he entered a room. Bankers would laugh a beat too long at his jokes. Politicians returned his calls within minutes. But to me, he was just Grandpa Will. The man who drank his coffee black, who despised unnecessary noise, and who believed that silence could tell you more about a person than any stream of words ever could. As his health slowly declined, my family suddenly became incredibly busy. Everyone visited, of course, but their visits were always fleeting, performed. My father, always impeccably suited, would check his watch twice, offering a clipped, "Dad, just wanted to see how you're doing. Got a meeting." My mother would bring an expensive bouquet, leaving it untouched in a vase. Ethan would breeze in once, stand strategically near the door, and offer a booming, "Hang in there, Grandpa. You're strong." Then they'd all leave, and the room would feel colder, emptier. I, however, stayed. Not for an inheritance, not for gratitude. Not because I thought it would earn me anything. I stayed because someone just had to. I'd adjust his pillows when his breathing grew ragged. I'd read the newspaper aloud when his eyesight failed, patiently letting him drift off. I listened to the same stories, the same anecdotes, over and over, never correcting him, even when I knew every single word by heart. One afternoon, as the last of the week's sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds, he reached out and took my hand. His grip was frail, but the intention was firm. "Hear that?" he whispered, his voice barely there. "Hear what?" I leaned in, my heart aching. "The quiet," he said. "Most people are terrified of it." He looked at me then, truly looked at me, as if etching my face into his memory. "You're not afraid," he continued. "That's why you're still here." I swallowed, fighting the lump in my throat. "Of course I am." He gave a faint, knowing smile. "No. You're afraid of being invisible. That's different." I had no words for that. It hit too close to home. Another time, late at night, with the hospital machines humming a monotonous lullaby, he murmured something that would haunt me. "Money doesn't show who people are. It just removes the mask faster." I chuckled softly, trying to lighten the mood. "You sound like you're planning something, Grandpa." His eyes flickered with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Maybe I am," he replied. I brushed it off as medication-induced rambling. I had no idea he was already mapping out my entire future. When he passed, it was just like him. Quiet. No dramatic last words, no tearful goodbyes. Just a slow release of my hand, and then nothing. I stood there, frozen, a single thought echoing. Now I really am alone. The one person who saw me, who never needed me to be louder or sharper or different, was gone. What I didn't know then was that even in death, my grandfather was still watching. The funeral itself was a perfectly orchestrated affair, exactly what he would have wanted, or what people thought he would have wanted. Simple, controlled, no messy speeches. The chapel was a sea of black suits, polished shoes, and surgically precise white flower arrangements. Everything looked expensive, everything looked respectful, and none of it felt real. I stood at the back, my hands clasped so tightly they ached, watching my family perform their grief like actors who'd rehearsed their roles too well. My father delivered his condolences in a low, steady voice. My mother dabbed her eyes at carefully selected moments. Ethan moved through the crowd, radiating confidence, accepting sympathy as if he were the main recipient. No one stood beside me. No one asked if I was okay. They didn't need to. In this family, that question was only asked if there was something to gain from the answer. Whispers drifted through the air, soft but razor-sharp. How much do you think he left? The real estate alone is worth a fortune. Ethan's probably set for life. Each sentence felt like a small, quiet cut. I told myself to tune it out, that this wasn't the time. But grief makes you raw. Every word felt louder, every glance heavier. At one point, my father's eyes met mine across the room. For a split second, I hoped he might come over, say something. Instead, he gave me a curt nod, then turned back to a conversation about logistics. The lawyer will contact us next week, he said. We'll handle the details. As if I wasn't even there. After the service, people scattered quickly. No lingering embraces, no genuine shared memories. Just polite goodbyes and plans already forming for whatever came next. Money has a way of doing that. It pulls people forward, never letting them stay too long in the past. At the cemetery, as his coffin was slowly lowered into the earth, something inside me finally broke. This was it. The end of the only unconditional relationship I'd ever known. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand that someone, anyone, notice how profoundly unfair this felt. But I stood there in silence, because silence was what I had always been good at. Later that evening, it was me who returned to his quiet, old house. Not my parents. Not Ethan. Just me. The air smelled faintly of dust and old books. I moved slowly from room to room, touching familiar things. His watch on the dresser, the chair by the window where he used to read, the desk with his neat, deliberate scribbles of numbers. I sank into that chair and finally, quietly, allowed myself to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough to let the ache breathe. A few days later, a thick, formal envelope arrived. It announced the reading of William Carter's last will and testament. My hands trembled as I held it. I'd spent my life learning not to expect much, but still, a small, dangerous hope flickered. Maybe he remembered. I set the letter down, utterly unaware that when I stepped into that law office, everything I believed about my place in this family was about to be laid bare, publicly. The office itself was cold, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Polished wood, frosted glass, leather chairs, perfectly symmetrical, as if to remind us who truly belonged. I arrived early, instinctively taking the chair farthest from the head of the table, making myself as small as possible. One by one they filed in. My father, Richard, strode to the front, settling into a seat like it had been reserved for him. My mother followed, her lips a thin, tight line. Ethan sauntered in last, supremely confident, already wearing a smirk that said he knew exactly how this would end. No one greeted me. No one asked how I was doing. The lawyer, Daniel Ross, cleared his throat. "We are here," he began, his voice calm, "to read the last will and testament of William Carter." My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm. He started with my father. To Richard Carter, $5 million. My father leaned back, a flash of smug satisfaction crossing his face before he quickly masked it with a solemn nod. To my mother, $3 million. She let out a soft, relieved breath and reached for my father's hand. And to Ethan Carter, $2 million. Ethan didn't even try to hide his grin. He glanced at me, raised an eyebrow, and mouthed, "Told you." I just stared at my hands, willing myself to remember. "Don't expect anything. You knew this." Daniel paused, turning the page. The room fell utterly silent. And for Hazel Carter. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. My ears were buzzing. The sum of $50. 50. Not 50,000. Not even a symbolic token. Just 50. Ethan's laugh shattered the silence. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "That's poetic." Someone else chuckled softly. I didn't look up to see who. My father. He didn't laugh, not openly. He just smiled. A quiet, cruel smile of satisfaction. The kind that confirms a long-held belief. "This proves something," he said lightly. Dad knew who was practical and who wasn't. My mother refused to meet my eyes. Heat rushed to my face, then drained away, leaving behind a cold, hollow emptiness. I waited for the lawyer to say more. An explanation. A letter. Some final, hidden message. But Daniel simply slid 2 crisp bills across the table towards me. "Please sign here," he said, his tone utterly neutral, perfectly professional. I picked up the money. It felt impossibly heavy. The room hummed around me. Whispers, shifting chairs, the quiet, collective relief of people who had gotten exactly what they came for. No one spoke to me. No one asked if I was okay. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just stared at the bills in my hand, because even then, a part of me knew my grandfather had never been careless. Not ever. And then, as I subtly tilted the money under the office's harsh overhead light, I saw it. The tiny mark. So faint, it could have been a manufacturing flaw. Except I knew better. I folded the bills carefully, slipped them into my purse, and stood up. "I think we're done here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. No one tried to stop me. As I walked out, I heard Ethan's laugh behind me again. But this time, something inside me wasn't breaking. For the first time, it was waking up. By the way, if you're still with me on this unbelievable journey, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. I have so many more stories to share, and your support means the world to me. Engine off, hands still tightly gripping my purse. My reflection stared back from the windshield, pale, tense, but strangely focused. $50. That was all it took. I pulled the bills out again, smoothing them on my lap. Most people would have either angrily crumpled them or shrugged them off, pretending it didn't sting. But Grandpa had taught me to look closer. Details. He used to tap the side of his notebook. That's where the truth hides. An unsettling certainty settled over me. I tilted the bills under the dim garage light. There it was again. A tiny, almost imperceptible line, like a deliberate scratch near the serial number. Not random. Not accidental. One mark on the first bill, another on the second. My pulse quickened. I checked the numbers. On one bill, 3 digits were faintly underlined. On the other, 2 more, positioned so precisely they had to mean something. This wasn't a stain. It wasn't wear and tear. This was intentional. He did this, I thought, a shiver running through me. Grandpa was meticulous. He abhorred loose ends. If he wanted to leave me nothing, he simply wouldn't have bothered with $50. Unless the money itself wasn't the inheritance. Unless it was the key. I drove across town, my hands tight on the steering wheel, an address surfacing in my mind, pulled from a deep, long-buried memory. The old bank. The one Grandpa had used for decades, the one he trusted when he trusted no one else. The lobby was hushed when I walked in. Marble floors, soft lighting, the scent of paper and polish. It felt like stepping into another era, a place where secrets were kept and voices stayed low. My heart hammered as I approached the front desk. "I need to speak with the branch manager," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's about my grandfather, William Carter. The receptionist's polite expression instantly shifted. One moment, please. Minutes later, I was led into a private office. The man behind the desk, Mr. Thompson, rose as I entered, gray hair, sharp eyes, radiating calm professionalism. "How can I help you, Miss Carter?" he asked. I didn't waste a second. I placed the two $50 bills on his desk and slid them toward him. "These were left to me in my grandfather's will," I explained. "And I think he marked them." Mr. Thompson frowned slightly, then picked up the money. At first, he looked bored, polite, perhaps a little indulgent. Then his eyes narrowed. He leaned closer, turning the bills, meticulously checking the serial numbers. And then he froze. The color drained from his face so rapidly it startled me. "Where did you get these?" he asked, his voice suddenly guarded, almost hushed. "You already know," I replied. "From William Carter." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, walked to the door, and quietly, deliberately locked it. Then he returned to his chair and looked at me with an expression I hadn't expected: respect. "These markings," he said slowly, "are not a coincidence." My breath caught in my throat. "They're a verification sequence," he continued. "And if I'm right, you're the only person who could have brought them here." I felt lightheaded. "What does that mean?" I whispered. Mr. Thompson folded his hands on the desk. "It means," he said, his voice dropping, "your grandfather left something outside the will. Something no one else was meant to touch." The room suddenly felt impossibly small. "And the money?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He glanced at the bills one last time. "The money," he said quietly, "was just the invitation." My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind, crystal clear. "If you want to hide the truth, put it where no one bothers to look." And for the first time since that cold, humiliating will reading, I understood. The real inheritance hadn't been announced in that lawyer's office. It had been placed, deliberately, directly into my hands. Mr. Thompson didn't rush me. He simply sat back, studying my face with the careful intensity of someone assessing how much truth a person can absorb at once. "Before we go any further," he said, his voice even, "I need to confirm your identity." My hands trembled slightly as I handed over my ID. He scanned it, typed something into his computer, and then paused. His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "It's exactly as he said," he murmured. "As who said?" I breathed, my heart beginning to race again. "Your grandfather." Mr. Thompson stood, moving towards a large steel cabinet embedded in the wall behind him. He opened it with a key, then entered a code, his movements practiced, precise. "There's a private deposit box here," he explained, "registered solely to William Carter. It exists entirely outside the will, outside probate. Completely separate." My throat went dry. Why wasn't anyone else told about it? He looked at me then, his gaze unwavering. "Because your grandfather instructed us not to tell anyone, unless they came with proof." He placed the two bills beside a document on his desk. "These markings," he continued, "are part of a verification system he designed himself. He believed numbers tell the truth, if you know how to read them." That sounded exactly like Grandpa. I followed Mr. Thompson down a quiet, cool corridor. We stopped before a heavy door. He entered another code, and it opened with a soft, almost reverent click. Inside was a small room, lined with secure boxes. He unlocked one and slid it open. I was completely unprepared. Neatly arranged gold bars gleamed under the light. Folders labeled with company names I recognized instantly. Investment documents, bonds, accounts. My knees buckled. "This," I whispered, my voice barely there. "This is approximately $32 million, Mr. Thompson finished calmly. "Conservatively." I covered my mouth, tears blurring my vision. But it wasn't the sheer scale of the money that made my chest ache. It was the plain, cream-colored envelope resting on top of everything else: my name, Hazel, scrawled in my grandfather's familiar handwriting. My hands shook as I picked it up. "He left that specifically for you," Mr. Thompson said softly. "We were instructed never to open it." I could only nod, tears silently falling. Back in his office, seated once more, I carefully opened the envelope. The paper inside was folded with such precision, as if he'd taken his time, as if he knew this exact moment would come. "My dear Hazel," it began. "If you're reading this, it means you saw what others didn't. That already tells me I was right." More tears slid down my cheeks. "I gave you $50, not because that's what you deserved, but because I needed you to see the truth with your own eyes. Money doesn't change people. It only removes the excuses." I could hear his calm, certain voice in my head. "I wanted you to watch who smiled, who laughed, who stayed silent when you were diminished. Those reactions matter more than any speech at a funeral." My chest tightened with a painful ache. "You were the only one who stayed when there was nothing to gain.
You didn't ask.
You didn't push. You didn't perform. That is why I trust you." I pressed the letter to my chest, my shoulders shaking. He had seen everything. The money in that box is not a reward. It is a responsibility. Protect yourself with it. Build a life that doesn't require you to beg for respect. And when they come, and they will, remember this: love that depends on money was never love to begin with. I wiped my eyes, steadying myself. The final line: "Don't make yourself small again. Grandpa." The silence that followed was sacred. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat gently. "Your grandfather also left legal instructions," he said. "If you choose to proceed, we can establish a trust immediately. Anonymous, protected. No one can touch it without your consent." I took a deep, shuddering breath. Outside that office, my family was probably still celebrating, counting, planning. They thought their story had ended. But as I carefully folded Grandpa's letter and placed it back into the envelope, I realized something profound. This wasn't the end. This was the moment everything truly began. And the next time my family looked at me, they wouldn't be seeing the quiet one anymore. They wouldn't even recognize who I had become. They didn't give me much time. 3 days. That's all it took for the truth to leak. My phone became a frantic instrument, ringing nonstop with calls I ignored, messages I didn't open, voicemails stacking up like a chorus of warning signs. I knew who it was, but I didn't expect them to show up in person. It was early evening when the knock came. Not polite, not hesitant. Sharp and impatient, as if the door itself owed them something. I looked through the peephole. My father, my mother, and Ethan, all standing there, expressions perfectly practiced, a blend of manufactured concern and naked expectation. I took a slow, steadying breath and opened the door. "Hazel," my mother began immediately, stepping forward. "We need to talk." They walked in without waiting for an invitation. My father's eyes immediately swept my apartment, scanning every detail, every modest piece of furniture, every quiet shelf, as if searching for some kind of proof. "You certainly kept this place modest," he observed, his tone loaded. "Interesting," I replied, my voice flat. "Nothing." Ethan leaned against a kitchen counter, arms crossed, a familiar smirk playing on his lips. "Guess Grandpa didn't think you needed upgrades, huh?" I finally spoke, my voice carefully controlled. "Why are you here?" My father didn't hesitate. "We know about the account," he stated flatly. "The one you didn't mention." The air in the small apartment suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, my voice calm, almost too calm.
He scoffed.
"Don't insult us.
Someone at the bank talked.
We know it's over 30 million. My mother reached for my arm. I instinctively stepped back. "Honey," she said, her voice soft, pleading. "This doesn't have to be ugly. We're family." Ethan barked a laugh. "Yeah, family. That thing you forgot about the second you got rich." Something inside me snapped then. Not loudly, but cleanly. Click. "You laughed at me," I said, my voice steady, gaining a sharp edge. "At the will reading. Do you remember that silence? When I was handed $50, did any of you stand up for me? Did anyone say it was unfair?" My father frowned, visibly annoyed. "That's not the point, Hazel." "It is," I retorted, my voice rising. "It's exactly the point." Ethan rolled his eyes.
"Fine. So what?"
Grandpa had his reasons. He always favored you anyway. My mother's eyes welled with tears. Hazel, please. You know your brother has plans, investments. This money could help all of us. There it is, I said quietly. My father's tone hardened. We're not asking. We're telling you to do the right thing. Split it. Keep the peace. My hands trembled, but I wouldn't let them see it. The right thing. I repeated, a dangerous calm settling over me. According to who? According to blood, he snapped. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, placing it deliberately on the small coffee table. According to the law, I said. They froze. What's that? Ethan asked, his smirk finally gone. My grandfather's legal instructions, I replied. The ones you didn't know about. I opened the folder, sliding the documents toward them. This account is held in trust, I continued, my voice firm. Separate from the will, fully legal, fully protected. My father's face darkened with a mixture of fury and disbelief. You planned this? No, I said. He did. Hazel, don't do this, my mother whispered, her face pale. I met her eyes. I'm not doing anything. I'm honoring his wishes. Ethan's voice turned sharp, laced with genuine anger. You think you're better than us now? No, I answered, my gaze unwavering. I think I'm done being smaller. My father straightened, his eyes blazing. If you don't share, we'll challenge it. I nodded once, a small, confident gesture. You can try, I said. But there's a clause in the will. Any legal dispute voids your inheritance. The room went utterly still. Ethan's smirk was replaced by pure shock. That's a bluff, he stammered. It was read out loud. I reminded him, my voice cool. You were there. My father clenched his jaw. My mother looked between us, her eyes wide with panic. You wouldn't, she whispered. I already am, I replied. They stood there for a long moment, the realization of their miscalculation dawning on them. Finally, my father turned towards the door, his face a mask of bitter resentment. You'll regret this, he spat. Maybe, I said. But as the door closed behind them, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt like relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was standing my ground, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that this was the exact moment my grandfather had been preparing me for all along. The silence after they left didn't just end that night. It spread. At first, it was subtle. My phone stopped ringing. Group chats quietly vanished. Invitations I never expected suddenly became glaringly noticeable by their absence. I was erased from the family calendar without a single word. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. No calls, no messages, no explanations. Just quiet. And I would be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Some nights, I sat alone on my couch, staring at my silent phone, wondering if I had gone too far, been too harsh. Had choosing myself truly meant choosing loneliness? Because no one talks about that part. They tell you to set boundaries. They tell you to protect your peace. They don't tell you how profoundly empty it can feel, especially at first. My parents never called. Ethan blocked me on social media. I found out by accident, staring at his blank profile longer than I should have. This was it. I had finally said no. And this was the price. I poured my energy into work, into routine, into intentionally cultivating a life that was quiet and small, just as my grandfather had lived despite his vast empire. I didn't buy a bigger house. I didn't flaunt my wealth or change my lifestyle. The money stayed exactly where it was, protected, untouched, invisible. Because the truth was, money had never been my goal. What I truly yearned for was safety. Weeks later, in a quiet courthouse hallway, I finalized the trust documents. The lawyer explained everything, carefully emphasizing words like protection, consent, control. This ensures no one can pressure you, she said gently. Not now, not ever. I nodded. Pressure had defined my entire upbringing. This was the first time I had ever felt truly free from it. Life moved forward, not with a bang, but with a quiet, steady rhythm. A year later, I met Lily. She was born on a rainy Tuesday morning, tiny and red-faced and utterly perfect. When the nurse placed her in my arms, something inside me clicked into place, rearranged itself completely. I looked down at her, and I made a promise I didn't say out loud. You will never have to earn love by shrinking yourself. My parents didn't come to the hospital. They didn't send flowers. They didn't ask. And surprisingly, that no longer shattered me. Because as I watched Lily sleep against my chest, her small fingers curled around mine, I finally understood something my grandfather had known all along. Family isn't defined by who shows up when there's money on the table. It's defined by who stays when there's nothing left to gain. Still, sometimes, late at night, when the world was utterly quiet, I'd wonder if this distance was permanent. If the door I had closed would ever open again. But I didn't chase the answer. I had learned that peace doesn't come from fixing people who refuse to change. It comes from choosing a different future. And I was finally ready to build one, even if I had to do it alone. There was no dramatic victory parade. No apology tour. No sudden, blinding realization for my family. What changed was far quieter than that. It was safer. I moved slowly, intentionally. I worked with lawyers and advisors who answered only to me. The trust Grandpa had carefully constructed became a sturdy, unshakable wall. For the first time, no one could corner me with guilt. No one could threaten me with family. No one could make me smaller for their comfort. And I didn't feel powerful. I felt protected. As Lily grew, I built a life the way my grandfather had taught me, simple on the surface, strong at the core. I invested carefully. I set aside a future for her education. I donated quietly to causes that supported women who needed legal protection, women who were told, that's just how family is, because I knew how truly dangerous that sentence could be. Sometimes people ask if I regret it. If I regret not sharing. If I regret walking away. If I regret being labeled cold or selfish. I don't. Because regret only comes from acting against your own truth. And for once, I hadn't. My grandfather didn't leave me $50. He didn't even leave me millions. He left me clarity. He showed me exactly who would laugh when I was humiliated, who would stay silent, and who would only reach for me when they needed something. And more importantly, he showed me who I was when I finally stopped asking for permission to exist. The last thing he gave me wasn't money. It was the courage to say no, the strength to stand alone, and the profound freedom to build a family that would never confuse love with control. When I look at Lily now, laughing without fear, growing without conditions, I understand the true inheritance. Not wealth, not revenge, not even validation, just peace. And that was worth more than every single dollar he left behind. What an incredible journey, right? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand up for yourself against your family, or choose your own peace over their expectations? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.